What's going on, guys? This is Tower number 9, and I'm bringing you some footage testing out a Cassian deck. So I am playing Cassian Cunning. This is my low-cost Cassian concept, and I'm playing against Endless, a friend from the Star Wars Legion community who's now getting into Star Wars Unlimited, and he's playing Han Solo Command. So let's see how this goes. So I have this Cassian build, which is sort of focused on this Cassian build, sort of focused on cheap cheap units. So that what I'm thinking with this one is if I play a lot of cheaper cards, I'm going to be able to use those cards, get Cassian's ability going to refill my hand after I've played out a bunch of cards, and then use that to um, hopefully make up for having such a low cost curve by just getting more cards on the board with that ability. I have a lot of units that can deal 3 damage to the base to enable Cassian's card draw, and we're gonna see where it goes from there. So okay, so this is Cassian as an action 1 resource. If you've dealt 3 or more damage to an enemy base this turn, draw a card. So card draw typically considered very powerful. So I lead off with Sabine, Ran Explosives Artist, 2 cost 2/3. On attack, you may deal 1 damage to the defending enemy unit or to a base. Also has a defensive ability. My opponent plays the Falcon, 3 cost 3/4, and enters play readied. Also has that upkeep cost, but Han's ability to smuggle in an extra resource there, allowing him to play the Falcon on the first turn, which is a really good opener. And it is especially good if the opponent starts in space. So against Han, you got to watch out because a turn 1 Falcon can really set you back. If you let off with an A-Wing or something and the opponent goes turn 1 Falcon and takes it out, that can be a problem. So we're going to see what's going on here. So there's also a nice little interaction. Endless can pay for the Falcon's upkeep costs. The downside for the Falcon to make up for its huge efficiency is that at the start of each turn, you have to spend a resource or else return it to your hand. Or I'm sorry, not at the start of each turn. So at the start of each turn with Han, you have to defeat one of your resources. The Falcon has, when you ready cards during the regroup phase, either pay 1 or return this unit to her owner's hand. So in this case, my opponent can spend the 1 in the regroup phase using the resource that Han defeats as the downside to his ability. So by that method, if you use Han's temporary resource, you do not have to pay for the Falcon in essence. Um, I swing in for 3, only for it to be ambushed by Ezra Bridger here. And when this unit completes an attack, look at the top card of your deck. You may play it, discard it, or leave it on top. My opponent looks at the card, ends up deciding to discard it. It's a Battlefield Marine. So that was ambushed in with the Energy Conversion Lab, defeating Sabine. Pretty annoying for me, quite frankly. I'm going to bring out Greedo. My opponent swings in with the Falcon, doing another 3 damage. I'm also going to play a Lothal Insurgent, so this is going to force my opponent to draw a card and then discard a card at random. Random discard, they're getting home 1. Not a very relevant unit right now, but could be scary later on in the game. So if this ends up going long, I'm probably going to be happy to see that go. Lothal Insurgent is a 3/2, and when played, if you've played another card in the turn, then the opponent draws a card and discards a card at random. So we're going to go into the next turn of this game, and this time it's going to be Endless with the initiative. Still has that Ezra, so that's pretty annoying for me, honestly. Ezra can in this case attack one of my units and then potentially get that ability to play a card from the top of the deck or whatever. That's a nice card advantage. Kind of makes up a little bit for Han's card disadvantage that he incurs from using his ability to create a temporary resource. So the way that Han's leader ability works is that it gives you a temporary resource for the turn, an extra resource. But the downside is that at the end at the start of the next turn, you have to discard a resource. So even though you get that resource, it doesn't help in the longer term. So my opponent hits my base, was considering playing Bright Hope, but decides instead to hit the base for 3 with Ezra, looks at the top card, and amusingly, I think it ends up being another Bright Hope. Um, yeah, so he's going to discard it, but then ends up deciding, actually, let's bring out this Bright Hope. So for 4, Bright Hope hits the field, so he could choose to return Ezra to hand and draw a card, or he could leave Ezra on the board. Ends up deciding to return Ezra, so that will be further card advantage here. Not just because he played a card from the top of the deck, but by returning the damaged Ezra, he also draws a card with Bright Hope's ability, and now he has a 2/6 Sentinel in space. This is actually very annoying for me because, oh, and we realize here that my opponent had forgotten to pay for the Falcon, and there wasn't a temporary resource to pay for at that time, so we ended up deciding, okay, whatever, we have return to hand. But this Bright Hope is quite annoying because I had actually hoped to play my own Falcon and use Shoot first to clear Endless's Falcon, but with the 2/6 Sentinel Bright Hope, I can no longer actually do that. So I'm gonna instead try and make progress in the ground arena here. Use Cassian's ability to draw a card after swinging in with my Lothal Insurgent. End up playing another Lothal Insurgent. Endless drawing another card and then discarding one at random. Huge hand size there. Even after this random discard, he's going to have 6 cards in hand. Um, lot of card advantage. A lot of card advantage to be had with Ezra and Bright Hope, and end up getting a Battlefield Marine. That's okay. That's like a solid sort of unflashy but efficient kind of mainstay sort of unit. Just a very efficient drop early on, and later in the game it can be good too, in addition to another play, or more than one play even. Then swinging in for 3 with Cassian. Endless draws up. Massive hand size there. Cassian will not be able to deploy for another turn, but Han can hit the field before Cassian does because he will be able to use his ability this turn if Endless wants, and with all those cards, it seems very likely he'll want. He'll be able to use his ability this turn in order to make a temporary resource go up to 6. So in this case, Endless also has a great counter to me right now by playing a copy of Outmaneuver, which exhausts all units in an arena of your choice. So in this case, he exhausts 3 ground units and prevents a potential 9 incoming damage, more if I had any damage boost effects. Um, I'm going to bring out K2. My opponent uses Han's ability. I'm going to take the initiative, but I was feeling pretty good about the potential race here until I got hit by that outmaneuver, and now I'm feeling very behind in that. I'm feeling very behind in that aspect here, um, since I basically just skipped a turn, and Analyst is going to get to do some major damage here, where I didn't get a chance to do a whole lot. So each base has taken 9 damage with 16 life remaining now, but my opponent here swings in for 5, and then Han could just go after some of my units, but I think it's more efficient to just have Han attack the base and push to try to get lethal damage in. It's a tough situation for me here. And that is indeed what Endless chooses to do. So I'm down to just 7 life. Not not a comfy spot to be. On the plus side, I will have Cassian able to deploy this turn, but I really need to get some stabilization going and fast, or this game is going to be over pretty quick. So I do see the Spec Force Soldier, which is a good unit here because I could potentially remove the Sentinel from my opponent's copy of Bright Hope. So I could remove the Sentinel from my opponent's Bright Hope and then use my Falcon to clear Endless's Falcon um, as a potential play. Um, However, in this situation, because I'm so low on life, I may not get a chance to do that necessarily. Um, what I need to do, at least in the moment, is suppress Endless's stuff. So I go for it is an out, or it is a Bamboozle. which I play discarding the shoot first. So my thinking this turn is that I can stop Endless from defeating me. I can maybe get lethal this turn since I have 13 damage in the ground arena already, plus Cassian, plus maybe the Falcon, and then Spec Force Soldier to remove Sentinel on my opponent's Bright Hope. My opponent surprise strikes me. I'm down to 1 life, so I use Jeddah City to remove, give -4 to Bright Hope. But unfortunately, my opponent has another surprise strike, which pushes just enough damage through, swinging for 5 -4, 1 to do lethal damage to my base there, and Endless gets the win. So yeah, interesting situation. Bright Hope was quite annoying for me there. It's possible I should have just played out my Falcon and traded it with that Bright Hope. I'm not really sure. Or like maybe I could have attacked into it, and then if he was just pushing at my base instead, I could then use the shoot first to clear his Falcon. But overall, it was a situation where I was thinking that I was going to be able to I was thinking that I was going to be able to outpace my opponent with a ground push with all those strong, 3 attack ground units that I had access to. But that copy of outmaneuver really set me behind. I could have done at least 9 damage that turn. And with the outmaneuver negating that turn, I was not able to catch back up, and Endless gets the win. So I'm removing these partisan insurgents from my deck in sideboarding. I don't actually think they should be in the deck. I want to change it. I don't think that they're a great inclusion. I'm gonna link my list in the deck list below. I'm not sure if it will still have them or not, but in this case, I'm gonna substitute them out. Not a unit that seems not a unit that seems good here. And I believe I put in some open fires, which I think I have as a sideboard card. Yeah. Okay, so we're gonna try round 2, and I'm gonna see if I can do better. Low cost. We are once again on low cost Cassian versus Han or versus Command Han. All right, so this time my opponent is going second. I'm going to lead us off with a Lothal Insurgent. Endless starts doing the random discard procedure, but I point out that it doesn't actually apply since I haven't played another card. In this case, just playing the Insurgent as a 3/2. And that 3/2 stat line is nice for Cassian because you can attack into the enemy base, do 3 damage, and then enable that card draw. So I'm thinking next turn I could potentially have a spicy turn. My opponent once again has the Falcon Rush here with Han, which is quite a good opening. Making a temporary resource, playing the Falcon, attacking the base, and then paying for the Falcon's upkeep with the temporary resource. So I'm going to resource this Alliance X-Wing, which would kind of be easy prey for my opponent's Falcon. This turn, I think what I can do is attack with the Lothal Insurgent. That's what I'll do at the start of the turn. 3 damage to the enemy base. I'm then going to be able to play Leia Organa Defiant Princess, get a resource back, potentially do other stuff too. So my opponent plays a Battlefield Marine. I can use Cassian's ability to draw a card here because I have done 3 damage to the enemy base. And that is what I do. See what my options are. Draw, I think it's a surprise strike, which is nice to have. Not going to be playing it this turn, but nice to have. And now I can use Leia Defiant Princess to ready up a resource and then play the Spec Force Soldier. So by this method, I'm going to go ahead and, or no, it's not a surprise strike, it's a shoot first that I've drawn there, I believe. Anyway, I'm going to use Leia Defiant Princess, stand up a resource, and then I'm going to go ahead and play the Spec Force Soldier to get another 2/2. So Leia Defiant Princess readying a resource is basically just playing a 1-cost 2/2, which is sometimes really efficient. In this situation, it allowed me to play 2 cards instead of just 1, which is going to go well with the Medal Ceremony that I have in hand. My opponent does have that Battlefield Marine, which could defeat one of my 2/2s and remain alive, but if it does that, it's not attacking and defeating the Lothal Insurgent, and the Lothal Insurgent is going to be able to push more damage to the base. So Leia Defiant Princess, 2-cost 2/2, and play it either ready a resource or exhaust a unit. Very efficient card. Um, really a good one, I think, in this low cost deck where you might well want to be playing it You can play it as an exhaust later in the game, and early in the game you can play it as a one cost 2/2 and bring out some other cards alongside it. So I think Leia Defiant Princess is quite a good card in this composition. Um, my opponent opts to remove her with the Battlefield Marine. This is probably a slight error. I think it's more efficient to remove the Spec Force Soldier instead of Leia, because that way, if Leia is the unit that I have remaining, if I play another Leia, I'd have to destroy the first one. Additionally, my opponent, if Leia is remaining, my opponent could potentially pick him off with Agent Callus, if he's playing that, which would give a card draw. So I think of the two, it would have been a little bit better to remove the Spec Force Soldier instead. A second Battlefield Marine now hitting the field. I've swung in for 3 with the Lothal Insurgent. I'm going to use Cassian's ability to draw a card. I see a Fleet Lieutenant here. Falcon continues hitting my base, has done substantial damage to my base already. I'm going to use a shoot first to have my Spec Force Soldier clear the undamaged Marine. I'm trying to get some control of this arena if possible, and then we're going to play Sabine Wren, Explosives Artist, and then we're going to use the Medal Ceremony, giving an experience to the local Insurgent and to the Spec Force Soldier. So buffing up my units there for some potential extra damage, and we will see where we go from here. I'm going to resource this A-Wing. My opponent's Falcon sort of has the dominant position in the space arena, and I'm going to focus on the ground and hope that I don't get outmaneuvered for a big reset like happened last game. Arena trading is fairly common in this game. You see these situations where one deck wins space, one deck wins ground. Leia Defiant Princess on my opponent's side of the board, exhausting my Lothal Insurgent. I'm going to spend 3 and use a Fleet Lieutenant to hit the enemy base here, doing 5 damage. The reason I used the Spec Force Soldier with the Fleet Lieutenant instead of Sabine is that Sabine can't be attacked because I have at least 3 aspects among other units. So my opponent's standing Battlefield Marine cannot defeat Sabine here. I end up getting a Lothal Insurgent from my opponent, ends up drawing me a shoot first and discarding one of my existing cards there, a Fleet Lieutenant. Probably a downgrade for me there. I won't be able to deploy Cassian for another turn. I could have Sabine here I could have Sabine attack and defeat the Battlefield Marine using just her on attack ability, so she would actually remain, she would actually remain, ready to, fight more, but it wouldn't do any damage to the base. I decide, no, I'm pushing for the racing outcome. I want this enemy base defeated as quickly as possible. End up playing out the surprise strike with Sabine and hitting for 6 more damage. Now Endless's base has 8 life remaining. I have 13. We both have substantial ground boards, but that Falcon is still reigning supreme in space. One advantage. So my opponent attacks with the Battlefield Marine there and trades with the Lothal Insurgent. Might have been good to have that unit attack earlier in the turn. But, I think Leia was used to exhaust a unit first. I think it might have been more efficient to have the Marine attack and defeat the Lothal Insurgent or one of the other units and then play the Leia afterwards, because the Leia could have exhausted Sabine Wren Explosives Artist even though Sabine could not be attacked. I end up resourcing, I think, this shoot first. Do have a wing leader, which dubiously valuable here, honestly. So I have 2/3/3s and Sabine, who is a special 2/3. That is enough damage to defeat the enemy base. Plus, I have Cassian potentially deploying this turn. Plus, I have this Wing Leader and Snapshot Reflexes. I'm hoping to close this game this turn. One notice that my opponent did not deploy Han. I think that unlike last game, in this game my opponent was really low on cards in hand and may not have wanted to use the only card that was left in order to accelerate Han out one turn earlier. in a situation where cards were in short supply. I had Sabine use snapshot reflexes to hit the base. Agent Callus shows up and removes my fleet lieutenant. Opposing base now on opposing base now on 4 life. I deploy Cassian, who can attack and deal 4 damage to clear the base. Because my opponent is tapped out, all resources exhausted. I know there's not much that can be done here about Cassian, and that is going to be the game. So Endless concedes there with Cassian poised to attack and defeat his base with the next move. It would have, in the event that my opponent still had cards that could be played that turn, like cards and resources, I think it would have been more optimal to lead off with the Wing Leader, because Wing Leader buffing the Spec Force Soldier would then threaten lethal. And then if my opponent had a card to deal with the Spec Force Soldier, then I bring out Cassian. Of course, I could have also just done it the other way around, so not really the hugest deal. All right, we're gonna move on. Actually, maybe it would be better to do the Wing Leader second, because that way you're using the element that your opponent doesn't know you have second. I think that would probably be better. I don't know. Something to consider. Going on to game 3, we are 1-1, and I'm gonna see if I can win the match here in the third round of Low-Cost Cassian versus Command Han. Both of these are kind of experimental decks, as you might imagine, not necessarily the most optimal, but this is still fun, and some early testing with Cassian, trying to see how he works. I do think so. My reasoning for going for Cunning here is to get a lot of cheap cards on the field. Cunning also has some nice units that swing for 3 early on. So you have Greedo and the Lothal Insurgent. Those are 3 attack units to enable that ability quickly. Um, my opponent uses. I jumped the gun here and took the first action, even though Endless has the initiative. I play Lothal Insurgent after Endless uses Han's ability. Then we see the Falcon start yet again. The Falcon Rush has been harsh. Not not super fond of seeing that hit me here, but this time I've drawn Open Fire, one of my sideboard cards, and one that's especially well poised to deal with the Falcon, I feel. We're gonna resource. I'm sorry, I said mulligan there for a moment. We're going to resource. I'm mulling over K2 versus the snapshot reflexes. Because this is a pretty fast game, I'm going to resource K2. K2 is actually not really that fast. He's more of a reach card. So Lothal Insurgent swings in for 3. My opponent plays a resupply, and I open fire to defeat the Falcon. Might have been advantageous for Endless to just attack immediately with the Falcon before playing that resupply. That's kind of one of those things where if you have ready units, you may want to use them before your opponent can interfere. Happy to see the Falcon go, though. That open fire that I brought in from the sideboard paying off by allowing me to eliminate a really annoying threat. However, with that resupply, Han is going to come out quite soon. In fact, uh, we might see him this turn. So the resupply brings my opponent from 3 resources up to 4. Then another resource goes up to 5, and then Han's ability could be used to go up to 6 and bring Han out on this turn, which seems rather early to me. So we will see how that goes. However, the resupply also meant, resources last turn were not spent on anything that helped the board. So we'll have to see. Ambush here from the Rogue Operative ends up defeating my Lothal Insurgent. So ambush cannot be used on bases. Ambush would be wildly better if ambush units could be used on bases. It's already very strong, and that would be just another level. So ambush used to defeat my Rogue Operative. Or no, I'm sorry. Ambush used by the Rogue Operative to defeat my Lothal Insurgent. I got the units mixed up there. I'm going to go ahead and play a Green Squadron A-Wing. I think this might be the first space unit that I've played in this entire match, because those Falcons from Endless have been reigning supreme in the space arena, but having finally cleared one, I'm going to put a bit of space presence of my own. Han's ability used, getting the temporary resource for the quick Han deployment. I'm going to play a Lothal Insurgent, which is going to force a draw, and random discard, ends up picking off a surprise strike, which I am happy to see. The surprise strike is one of the best cards in these aggro situations, and having that off the field is pretty good. I'm gonna put my water. Ah, here's my- Okay, so we are going to so Han ends up defeating my Lothal Insurgent, clearing the ground arena completely. So we are now on the other side of kind of the arena trade dynamic that we've seen in some earlier games, with myself being the one in space and Endless being the one on the ground. However, I have here some ground units that I may be able to get on the field and do some damage, get things going. End up resourcing this snapshot reflectors because it's kind of the lowest impact of the cards that I have. So I'm thinking I'm going to be able to use my Fleet Lieutenant to swing in for 5 damage with my Alliance A or with my Green Squadron A-Wing. I'll be able to play Greedo, and my remaining resource can be used to draw a card with Cassian Andor's ability. So hmm, this is kind of how this deck is meant to operate. Almost everything in the deck costs 3 or less. A substantial majority of the cards actually cost 2 or less. And so I am playing multiple cheap cards and using Cassian's ability to draw and keep up my ability to do that even while I'm still resourcing. And I'll probably stop resourcing on this next turn when I go up to 6, although depending on hand, I could potentially continue. Taking 4 damage there from the Rogue Operative attacking my base. I'm going to use Cassian here to draw a card. Leia Defiant Princess, that could be quite useful later on. Han hits my base as well. I'm going to play Greedo, and this still hasn't spent his resources this turn. Um, and actually doesn't. He takes the initiative. We talked after the game about what happened here, and I think it was that he had a hand of all like kind of reactive cards, exhaust type effects, stuff like that. I don't remember exactly what he said he had, but it was not, it wasn't really cards that were well suited to this scenario, which I, for one, am appreciating. Han swings in for 4 damage to the base. I have my Fleet Lieutenant defeat the Rogue Operative. So one interesting thing about Rogue Operative is it's actually only a 2/4, even though it does have Raid 2. So even though the Rogue Operative can swing for 4 damage, also my Fleet Lieutenant can attack and defeat it while remaining alive. Leia Defiant Princess arrives and exhausts Greedo. I'm going to be able to get Cassian on the field. Cassian deploys here. My opponent adds a temporary resource from the top of the deck. That's the on-attack ability for Han, which I think was maybe forgotten the first time. Still have all my resources here. If I get some attack into the base, I will be able to draw a card. Cassian's unit side of his ability is even better than the one on the leader side. So on the unit side, he has, I think it's just straight up the first time you deal or as a reaction or whatever, when you deal damage to the enemy base, you may draw a card. Use this only once per turn. My opponent actually plays an outmaneuver. I think this is one of the reactive cards that he had on the previous turn. So I think he had like this Leia Defiant Princess outmaneuver. I don't remember what else it might have been, but all these like kind of reactive exhaust effects. Use it here just to exhaust Cassian. I use a Fleet Lieutenant to send my A-Wing into the base for 5, also drawing a card with Cassian's ability. My opponent takes the initiative. I have 2 Leia Defiant Princesses in hand, but I'm going to not play either of them because in this situation, what I want to do is use her for her exhaust ability. I now have lethal damage on the board. So my goal this turn is to contain my opponent, prevent him from potentially destroying my base with aggressive plays this turn, which we could see. So if we had, for instance, the Falcon plus a surprise strike, that could close out the game. Um, and there are a lot of things that can happen in this game, but right now I have a pretty strong board in the ground. My opponent actually plays a change of heart and gains control of one of my units. I think it ends up being the full health fleet lieutenant here. He initially takes the low health fleet lieutenant, but then he's like, wait, no, I want to take the full health one. I think it might have actually been advantageous to take Greedo instead because of Greedo's when defeated ability. I have Greedo attack and defeat Han. But I miss the top deck. So when defeated, Greedo discards the top card of your deck. If it is a non-unit card, you may deal 2 damage to a ground unit. So if I had hit that top deck, I would have been able to discard Leia. However, I don't hit it, and Leia is then used to trade with my Fleet Lieutenant. Um, Although I think we forget to remove Leia here. So that Leia Defiant Princess on my opponent's side of the board should actually be defeated, having attacked and traded with my Fleet Lieutenant. I bring out my own Leia Defiant Princess and exhaust the Fleet Lieutenant that my opponent had stolen with that copy of Change of Heart. So then I'm going to be able to attack the base, draw a card, and then potentially play an open fire. I'll probably play the surprise strike that I have in hand. So I actually use that immediately. Go ahead for 6 damage to the base. Draw a card. It's a Lothal Insurgent, which I'm now also going to be able to play. And I can also swing in for 4 more damage to the base. So we're going to do Lothal Insurgent. My opponent draws a card and discards a card at random. Let's see what we can get. Ends up being a Falcon. I'm very happy to see that go. The Falcon's a scary card. And then my Cassian swings in for 4 damage to the base, opposing base now at 2 life. And it's looking pretty favorable for me here because I have so many units that can swing for lethal. That Leia Defiant Princess on my opponent's side should have been removed, I believe, unless there was a shoot first or something that I missed. I think that Leia should have been defeated. But I have a much stronger board. Even if my opponent has an outmaneuver, I'll be able to win in the Space Arena. My opponent shows that he has home one, but even that is not going to be able to. Even that is not going to be able to. Or actually, I think that was a temporary resource home one being discarded. No, I think he actually concedes the game at this point. It was just showing that he had that, but the situation was too unstable. Okay, so that's gonna do it. That's gonna do it for this video. This was Low-Cost Cassian versus Command Han. A few thoughts on these decks before we close things out. I think Command Han can be pretty solid. I note that in this game we ended up playing it very, very aggressively, and because it was such an aggressive game, Command Han didn't get to use his like late game strengths. Like home one, I don't think saw play in any game. In game two, we did see a resupply, but that was and that did let Han come out very early, but it was not wasn't super huge necessarily. I think that the Command Han build is advantaged if we go into the late games. The fact that we ended up so aggro was favorable to me. That outmaneuver though hit me really hard, and it's possible that in other rounds we could have seen outmaneuver have a big impact too. Those Falcon Rush starts are really good with Han. It's very scary to have the Millennium Falcon on the first turn of the game. Um, So yeah, interesting match. Ultimately took it 2-1, though we are both using very experimental decks, and Endless is a relatively newer player, so this is, I think we're neither of us are exactly playing at the height of competition here. Overall, I think the low-cost Cassian build seems like an interesting strategy. I could feel like the synergy with the low-cost units I was running and the card advantage granted by Cassian. However, there is an important question that you have to ask yourself when you're playing something like this, and is it better to just play Sabine? Right now, if I were going to a tournament, I think it's better to just play Sabine. Sabine is very aggro. She's very efficient. This sort of strategy, I think, has more ability to persist once the opponent has stabilized. You have the ability to be hopefully getting more cards, using a bunch of effects, doing stuff like that. You have a bit of a more resilient leader. You're not going to get immediately defeated by takedown or forced choke. But I think that Sabine's pure aggression is kind of more efficient than the tricks and stuff that Cassian can pull, at least for right now. Now, am I saying Cassian's bad? No, honestly, I was pleasantly surprised. I was sort of a skeptic of Cassian at first, but I think he did fairly well in these test games and some other test games that I played. I felt like the low cost strategy synergized well with what he was trying to do. So overall, I would say I don't feel like Cassian is jumping into the A tier or whatever, but I do actually feel like he has some strong stuff going, and it's going to be interesting to see how that goes in the future. I'll have the test version of my low cost Cassian build in the video description below for players who want to check that out. But yeah, thanks to y'all for watching, and we will be back later with some more Star Wars Unlimited content. I will catch you guys later.